On today's episode of Homeworthy, we're heading to New York City to visit Chelsea Fagan, CEO of The Financial Diet and author of A Perfect Vintage, as she prepares to host a French-style aperitif for her friends. Having lived in France and speaking French as her second language, she's inspired by the culture and incorporates its casual elegance into her life. Join us as Chelsea shows us around her home and shares some quick recipes perfect for your next gathering. Enjoy! You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. Before today's episode, click the join button below to support all of the storytelling we do on this channel. Our growing community of members help to directly fund more videos so we can capture these extraordinary homes from around the world. So join today to receive early and exclusive access to new Homeworthy videos.
Hi Homeworthy, I'm Chelsea Fagan here in New York City, and tonight I'm going to have a few friends over for a little aperitif, so come on in and help me set up. So one of my favorite things in my entire home, so this is the first home I've ever owned, which means it's the first time I've ever been able to do any kind of renovation. And one of the things I knew I wanted to do as soon as I bought this place was to build in a little bookshelf bar nook area for entertaining, obviously, but also for all of our books. And I had a really specific vision for what I wanted. And one of the things that was really important to me was a very whimsical and eye-catching and special wallpaper that kind of in and of itself looks like a piece of art, which I think this one does. It's heavily inspired by the wallpaper at the Carlisle Hotel Bar, Bemelman's Bar, done by very, very famous illustrator and writer Ludwig Bemelman. I actually have Bemelman's book, kind of a take on his time working in all of the really upscale fancy hotels here in New York City back in the 1920s. But he had just an incredible style. A lot of people know Bemelman's work from Madeline. And my father's actually an illustrator, as is my cousin. I have some of their work around too. So hand illustration has always been something that I really, really love. And so this wallpaper, although it is ludicrously expensive, for just one panel, I thought it was really worth the investment to sort of turn the bar nook into its own sort of living piece of artwork. One thing that I really love in my home, especially as it pertains to hosting and entertaining, are these highball glasses that I inherited from my grandmother. She was, in many ways, my icon, my idol. This is her watch. I wear it every single day. I have a lot of her stuff. Don't quite fit in a lot of them. She was much smaller than me, but she just had the most exquisite taste. She was an excellent painter. She always wore the most glamorous outfits, always perfectly coiffed, had the most incredible home style. She just was a woman that had so much to offer creatively. And I always think about her when I am sort of engaging in any kind of domestic creativity, because it really reminds me that for whole generations of women, the home and what we do with our homes was really one of the few areas that they had to express themselves and to sort of enact their vision. So my grandmother's highball glasses here, I very rarely break them out because if something were to happen to one of them, I could never forgive myself. But we do use them for very special occasions, and I have a lot of little pieces of hers throughout the house that, I don't know, they always just feel incredibly special and like a little homage to her every time I use them. One thing with setting the space too, when you're hosting, no matter the kind of space you're hosting in, is to really know the little touches that are worth investing in versus not necessarily worth investing in. One thing that I think always makes a huge difference is having fabric napkins. I love these little fabric cocktail napkins. They're from a brand called Cheffany. These were actually a gift from a friend, but those kinds of little touches are really the things that often make a huge difference when you're hosting. They feel really special, they make a big impact, but are usually not much more expensive and are also just better for the environment because you're not constantly throwing things away. In terms of setting up your space, I think one thing that a lot of people tend to think and put pressure on themselves for is that things need to be expensive or fancy in your home. I cannot stress enough, as someone who has always been pretty budget conscious, I've definitely had a lot of financial issues in my life, and am someone who doesn't feel comfortable spending a huge amount of money on things, especially if I'm not sure that I'll have them forever. I have almost literally no furniture or home decor items that I ever paid full price for, or that I got somewhere very expensive and fancy and designer. A lot of the items come from Facebook Marketplace, online auctions, flea markets, thrift stores, secondhand, literally found on the street. And that's kind of the secret with home decor, is that things like art and furniture almost never ever need to be paid full price for, because it's something that in general, if it's a high quality piece, is meant to last for years and years, decades on decades, and you can easily find often higher quality materials and better constructed pieces for a fraction of the price of new stuff, just by being a little bit more patient. Another thing that a lot of people don't necessarily know, but I like to take advantage of, is if you are buying a more expensive piece, like this dining table I have, which is actually Jonathan Adler. It's mahogany and the base is ebonized wood with brass bearings. It's a really, really nice, well-constructed table. And I actually bought it for 60% off because I got it as a floor model. A lot of people don't know that in furniture boutiques and higher end stores, or even really any store, but I use it for higher end stores, you can just go in and buy the stuff that's been sitting on the floor. It will sometimes have like a few nicks or scratches, but you can often get it for 50 or more % off just because it's already been sitting on the floor. And I actually got it for 60% off, including delivery, which as someone without a car is enormous. So one thing that I really, really love in my apartment, so my debut romance novel, which is actually about a woman who turns old dilapidated chateaus in France into hotels, which is a job that I would very much like to have. For the book, I wanted to work with some female artists and creatives that I really loved, and one thing I really wanted was an original oil painting for the cover of the book. So I actually reached out to an oil painter based up in Canada, Elizabeth Lenny, whose work I absolutely love, and I asked her if she would be interested in doing that commission. And not only did she do the commission for the novel, and it is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful romance novel covers I've ever seen, but she also was kind enough to gift me the original painting. So this definitely has one of the most important little places of prominence in my apartment, and I just love looking at it every day. It's a piece I never get tired of. One of the reasons I feel like people don't host as much as they could or maybe should is because they feel like they don't have a space that's good for hosting. Now, every time I talk about my apartment online, it causes a flurry of debate because by some standards, I have a very small apartment with a very small kitchen, especially compared to like the average home size in America. But for a lot of New Yorkers, including some apartments that I formerly lived in, I do have a lot of space. But the point is, I have a smaller space than many. I think my home is like 825 square feet, and I host all the time. I literally had a 16-person sit-down birthday dinner party for my husband in this very dining room. And that's obviously kind of an extreme example, but I do think that a lot more homes could be hosting ready than people actually think. Another big thing for having people over is lighting. Now, I have been in some beautiful spaces that were lit like a dentist's office for an evening dinner party, which was really unfortunate because, you know, people don't always feel their most comfortable when there's really harsh overhead lighting. I think we've all had some pretty negative experiences in certain, in certain mall dressing rooms where we just don't like the way that we look. We don't feel very comfortable. We don't feel relaxed. We don't feel beautiful. So creating diffused, warmer lighting is really important. A couple notes on that. One, in general, you want to, if you have a big overhead light, either turn it off or dim it. And you don't need a dimmer switch in order to dim lights. You can literally just get smart light bulbs that you can dim from your phone. That's what I have in all of my lighting. And I would say, generally speaking, you want to have at least a few different sources of light that come from different angles. So like table lamps, wall lamps, sconces, those kinds of things, so that people aren't just getting shone down upon. Another easy thing that I feel like is probably said a lot but can always be repeated is candles. I love having candles lit when people come over. I love a tapered candle. I love a pillar candle. I love all kinds of candles. It definitely also helps with creating flattering lighting. But do be careful about scented candles, especially when you're serving food. First of all, it can kind of conflict with the taste of the food, but also sometimes scented candles can be difficult for people's allergies, etc. So definitely try to have a few very neutral, unscented, maybe beeswax candles, things that you can light for the vibe, but don't necessarily change people's experience. Another little item that I really love, just because it's so cute and sweet and not something I necessarily would have bought for myself, but has such meaning to me, is this little bell that one of my oldest friends and her husband got for me after I threw a big dinner party for my husband, and I'm personally a little prone to giving a toast. I get, a little emotional when I'm having a lot of people I love over, and I love to, say a few words. And so I definitely was tinking my fork to my glass a few times, and my friend noticed, and she and her husband were like, she's gonna ruin her beautiful glasses. We have to get her a little bell. So now when I'm having a more formal gathering, I can just sort of ring the bell if I need to get people's attention, like call them to the table for dinner or, whatever it may be. And it has served me well. And I think it's just such a beautiful little object. It's a little brass pear. So as you can probably see in my home, I really love art. I am not myself super artistically inclined. I mean, I can sketch a little bit, and I do some more traditional art stuff, not very much, but a lot of my family are artists. My father is an illustrator his whole life, and my cousin is actually an illustrator. This is a piece that she did for me a few years ago. She's actually going to be illustrating a book that I have coming out next year that's actually about hosting. So I love getting to have a piece from her on my wall. But pretty much all of the art that you see, with almost no exception, I think, are all flea market, secondhand. I buy some stuff from museum gift shops when I like it. But for the most part, I've never really paid hardly any money for the art that I have, including, I have several actual oil paintings on here, but, I get them in random flea markets and thrift stores, and it's really just sort of about the art that speaks to me. But I also love having little pieces. Like I said, I'll get something from a museum gift shop, and some people I think can be pretty snobby about, don't have reproductions or don't have, prints or don't buy things off Etsy. And I really hate thinking that way, because ultimately I think you should have the art that makes you feel good and that you love to look at every day. And you should also know that they're not necessarily permanent things. You can have a framed concert poster that you liked or something that you found online. And if you get tired of it after a while, you can swap it out and maybe swap it back later. I also just love this lamp for no other reason than, it's actually from the 50s. I got it in an antique store upstate, but that is always just a very entertaining thing to be able to do when people are over. Another quick thing when you are setting up your space to have people over is flowers. Now, I personally am not super great at putting together floral arrangements. Like, I have my moments, but in general, I don't invest that much money. I always buy my florals from the grocery store. And one thing that I feel like is not necessarily like a tip or a hack, but it's something I live by, is that if you are not particularly good at floral arranging, you don't want to spend a lot of money on it, but you want something with a really big impact, just a bunch of hydrangeas. This is literally $22 worth of hydrangeas that I bought at the grocery store. All you have to do is just cut the stems and put them in water. And to me, they look very, first of all, to me, hydrangeas are always very Ina Garden coated, but also they just look impressive and done without really needing to do anything. One thing with hydrangeas though, and I have learned this the hard way from having many sad wilted hydrangeas, is that in order to keep them from like wilting and shriveling, you need to cut them on an angle, put them into hot water for like 30 seconds, and then put them into cool water, and then they will stay beautiful and fluffy forever. Not forever, but Another art thing, so this big pink sort of goldy green piece that I have in my entryway, which which is one of my favorite pieces that I own and always kind of makes a big statement when people come into my apartment, is actually Facebook Marketplace. A lot of my bigger, more substantial pieces I got off of Facebook Marketplace. Now, I'm not going to say that it was, $50. It was still several $100s, but compared to what I would have paid buying this from a gallery or a fancy antique shop here in Manhattan, it's night and day. So I cannot stress this enough, especially if you live in a bigger city, urban metro area, what have you. Use Facebook Marketplace. It is truly life-changing. So the aperitif is basically a cocktail hour, although it really does not have to entail actual cocktails, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically it is just sort of that pre-dinner magic hour moment where you're gathering around some easy, simple foods and just having a glass of something with people you love. One of the reasons I really love it so much and encourage people to start embracing it in their own home is because it's a really perfect way to host more if you are not particularly into or good at cooking yet. I do love to cook, and there are times when I make elaborate dinner parties, but there are also a lot of times when I just really cannot be bothered and I'm not super interested in the actual cooking part of things. I just want to have people over and have a nice time with them. And the good thing about the aperitif is that you literally don't even need to cook anything if you don't want to. So my husband and I usually spend a lot of every summer with his family and our friends over in France. And when we're at my in-laws' house every single night around dusk, first of all, they eat way later in France, which my people, that is one thing I have to give it up to them for. I think I was destined to live in Spain or something because I like a 9:30 p.m. dinner. But over there, the sun doesn't set in the summer until 10 p.m. So around 7:30 is when you'll do the aperitif. And my mother-in-law is not only not that interested in cooking, she's also perpetually running late. She was famously late to her own wedding and is often walking in the door from being out windsurfing or on the beach, minutes before people are arriving. And it is a core memory of mine, just her in the kitchen, throwing a few things together, opening a few bottles, and magically preparing everything minutes before the friends arrive. And so I really think having that sort of casual, sometimes even last minute aspect to it is what I think makes it such a great entry point to hosting. So one thing about the aperitif that is crucial is that it not be a lot of work. One of the biggest mistakes people make while hosting, and I say people meaning I've done this a million times myself, is create so much work for yourself that you are not able to actually enjoy your party. This is very common when you have people over for dinner, especially if you're doing something that involves a lot of cooking right before people arrive or right before they eat. And yes, sometimes you can splash out, do really big fancy recipes for, a very impressive dinner party, but the whole concept of the aperitif, especially in French culture, is that it is extremely low effort, it's very casual, no cooking is necessary, and it's really just about enjoying each other's company. So oftentimes when I have people over for a quick aperitif, the cooking consists of me just opening packages. Today though, I'm going to assemble a few things just to give you an idea of the kinds of things I like to make when I have a little bit more time, I'm not just coming home from work. And the concept with these is that they are extremely low effort and easy, but extremely sort of high reward. So I'm gonna be assembling a little cheese and charcuterie board. Listen, it's very impressive. People love to walk in and see a board, but it's literally just putting things on a plate. I'm gonna be doing my cacio e pepe fried olives. I have found personally that when you put cacio e pepe in front of basically anything, people go crazy, and fried olives are one of my favorite dishes. I know olives can be polarizing, but for those of us that love them, fried olives are genuinely a revelation because they take basically no work and are so impressive. I'm just doing some little charred romaine lettuce hearts with a little lazy girl aioli that I'm making. Putting a little char on your vegetables, especially in the summer months, is just such an essentially no effort way to make it feel a little elevated and like you're eating it at a restaurant. So we're gonna go ahead and make that stuff. So the first thing we're gonna start by making is our fried olives. So in general, whenever I fry anything, I always do the breading beforehand, oftentimes the night before, for no other reason than I hate breading things. It's very time consuming, it's kind of messy, and it's usually not something I have time for right before people walk in the door. So in this case, I breaded these olives this morning. Basically, all you do is you drain your olives, you pat them a little bit dry, make sure there's not a ton of olive brine left on them, dredge them in a little bit of flour, put them in a little bit of an egg wash, and then roll them in the breadcrumbs of your choice. I usually like to do panko, but you can do whatever you have on hand. And this method works for fried olives, for my beloved fried pickles, fried pickled okra, literally any kind of pickled or brined little vegetable you want. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're making fried olives or pickles or things like that, do not season the flour or the breadcrumbs. I know this is very difficult for those of us who like our food well seasoned, but olives are incredibly salty. So although we're putting a little bit of cheese on them at the end, which is also a bit salty, we generally want to avoid adding salt. So now that these are fully breaded, literally all we have to do is heat up some oil and then fry them off. So all I'm doing is just adding enough oil to coat at the bottom of my Dutch oven. Any heavy bottomed pot will do. I'm going to put that to a medium-high heat, and all we have to do is let it get hot. So while the oil is heating up for my olives, I'm going to char my romaine lettuce. And literally, what does that mean? Just basically burning it a little bit. I basically just heat up a cast iron skillet, and you just put your little lettuce down or whatever vegetables you're charring, and then just let them get a little bit blackish brown around the edges, and that's it. So while we're charring off the lettuce, we are going to make what I sort of half-jokingly refer to as my lazy girl aioli. Aioli is also something that we eat a ton of in France. There are different sort of regional cuisines, but where my husband's family is from in the Southwest, they eat a lot of aioli. And what I'm going to make is not technically an aioli, because an aioli is not just garlic and mayonnaise. And please, chefs, do not come for me. I know what I'm making is not actually an aioli, but again, the point of the aperitif is that this stuff is very quick and easy and something that you can make in a matter of minutes. And so I am using my little cheat code. So literally all I'm going to do here is just scoop a little bit of mayonnaise into my preferred vessel. Maybe a little more. I like Sir Kensington's. I know some people are big on, they have a lot of loyalty to like Duke's mayonnaise. That's good too, but I also like Sir Kensington's. So then I'm just gonna take my lemon, slice it here, squeeze a little bit of lemon juice onto it, squeezing it through my fingers so I can catch any seeds. I like a very lemony aioli, especially in summer. Then we're just gonna take a clove of garlic. We're gonna smash it here so that we can easily peel off the skin. Then literally all we're gonna do is just microplane our garlic. So we have our garlic and our lemon juice, and then I just do a little bit of salt. All of this is to taste. I only used 1.5 cloves of garlic. You can use a lot more. It's completely dependent on how much you want. But you just mix those 3 things together and you have quote unquote lazy girl aioli. So here we have our little charred romaine leaves and lazy girl aioli, something that took approximately 45 seconds, but feels incredibly impressive. So now we're just frying off our olives in some hot oil, and to make them cacio e pepe, I'm just going to microplane some pecorino and crack some pepper onto them. So on every batch, I just microplane a little bit of pecorino and crack a little bit of pepper. So 2 things with the kind of olives you'll want to use here. Number 1, make sure they're pitted, because no one wants to pop a piece of fried food in their mouth and accidentally break a tooth. And number 2 is I usually like to use a Castelvetrano olive because they're a little bit milder. They have a nice nutty flavor, not too overpowering, but use any olives you like. So now I'm going to set up my little cheese and charcuterie board, and I have to say, whoever invented these is truly a god, because there is literally no easier thing to do that feels more impressive and exciting to walk in and see. I don't have a ton of rules for my cheese boards, and I am always using different ingredients because I just sort of use whatever I happen to have on hand. But 2 things that I think always make it a little bit more impressive is utilizing all of the space on your board or plate, not leaving gaps in between things. And one secret to that is like put your crackers or bread also on the platter so that it takes up more space. And I always like to garnish with like a little bit of fresh herbs or something because it makes it feel finished. So I generally start my cheese boards by placing my cheeses And you'll notice here that these are not new cheeses. They are used, some of them, in part because, like I said, the point of a cheese board is to use the things you have. Sometimes I feel fancy and I pre-cut a few slices from each block, but I'm too lazy to do that. So then essentially with everything that is not a block of cheese, I just start arranging it. And I'll usually do little clusters of different things. Cheese boards are an entirely vibes-based art form, so just do whatever feels good. If you look at your cheese board like a bouquet, and why would you? But if you are, my favorite filler flower is fruit. I love fresh fruit on a cheese board, not only because it's extremely cheap and I usually have some on hand, but it's also nice and light and refreshing compared to things like heavy cheeses and charcuterie. So today I'm gonna put on some apple slices, and I always put a little lemon juice on my apple slices to keep them from going brown, as well as some raspberries. I never like to be too symmetrical with my cheese boards. I always like to sort of make them a little abstract, if you will. Normally I would also put olives on my cheese board, but as we are having fried olives, I won't be doing that today, but I do have some cornichons. How French. I actually find raspberries to be a bit of a textural nightmare personally, but I know other people love them, so I like to include them. Another really good filler is nuts. Here I'm doing some raw almonds, but you can do whatever kind of nut you like, and they're great for just filling in space. Then, like I said, I also like to arrange the crackers on the plate when I have space, just to fill it and make it look really bountiful and beautiful. Of course, I always give it a little fresh garnish. You'll notice that my plates and glasses and some other things are going to be a little mismatched today, but again, that's the point of the aperitif. I'm not going to waste time worrying about cleaning things if I don't have a full set all clean at the same time. I'm just going to use what I have. I always prefer to set up a drink station. I usually have a few options, including a signature drink, which I generally make something that you can either choose to spike or have it virgin, as well as another one or two options. And then I just set them out so people can serve themselves. That means they can have whatever they want without declaring their preference, and also means you get to enjoy your party rather than acting as your own bartender. Also, on the tip of, good art coming from anywhere, I get more compliments on this piece in my kitchen than almost anything else in my home, and I literally bought it for $4 on Etsy and printed it out at a local UPS. So the first part of setting up my drink station is just clearing off this little credenza here. It's a really nice location for a drink station because it's between my kitchen and the dining room, and it's perfectly accessible for everyone. So I put out my glasses. You may notice that these are slightly mismatched glasses because I don't have a full set clean right now of 6 / unbroken. But that's, again, the whole point of the aperitif. I have a little bowl of ice. Then I'm going to set up the actual drink ingredients. Now, the base that I made for the drinks is a fresh ruby red grapefruit juice with some homemade rosemary simple syrup. So that's the base of the drink. If you want to make it a cocktail, you can add a little bit of Campari and gin, and then both the cocktail and mocktail versions will be topped with sparkling water to make it kind of a spritz situation. I'm also going to put out a skin contact wine in case anyone would prefer that over a spritz. One thing I always do for my drink stations is make a little garnish station so that people can also garnish their own drinks and make them feel special. For this one, I am doing fresh rosemary and some grapefruit slices because those are 2 things in the drink. now I'm just gonna put out a few cocktail napkins. And I always recommend fanning out your cocktail napkins. It just feels so much more special. And that's my drink station. Now let's make a cocktail. So I'm going to make the cocktail version of my signature drink for the evening, and that's going to be Campari, gin, the rosemary grapefruit juice, and some sparkling water. She's a bitter queen. So we just have a tiny bit of Campari here at the bottom, and you're generally going to do about 1 part Campari to 2 parts gin. And then we're going to add as much grapefruit juice with the rosemary simple syrup as we like. I do roughly an equal part juice to as much of the Campari and gin as I've already added. Then we are going to top with sparkling water to make her a spritz. Then we're just going to give her a quick stir and we'll garnish. And there she is. But setting it up this way means that people can make it however they like, and they can choose to spike or not to spike, or maybe even have some of that skin contact wine, whatever you prefer. And we're just in time. My friends are about to get here. So here we have a full aperitif. Now, I chose to do a little bit more than just opening things up today, but trust me that I have thrown many aperitifs that involved opening a bag of chips and putting a bottle of wine on the drink cart. Ultimately, you should make it whatever feels right to you, but the whole point of the aperitif is that you don't need to have some big fancy dinner party in order to have people over. Like I said, my friends and I are actually going to dinner at a local restaurant after we enjoy this, so there is very little pressure on me and almost nothing to clean up. And because people are serving themselves their food, drinks, and water, it means I can just enjoy the party and not have to worry about taking care of everyone. Thank you for joining me in my New York City apartment for a somewhat French-inspired aperitif. It's been really fun, but I think I hear my friends, so I'll let you guys go. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.